So I think now we'll jump over to Katie stuff, and then if there are more questions at the end, I'll come up again and for both of us. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Katie Schabron. My study.
Katie, can you step forward?
Yes. Hi.
Keep waving your arms. Be a big bird. There you go.
Okay. So I'm Katie Schabron. My study is looking at bird window strike, specifically in relation to species-specific behaviors. So you can see up here the map of the campus, all those purple lines are the facades that we are looking at particularly. So I spent all summer, big chunk of spring, summer, and some of the fall, walking these, looking for deceased birds that have run into windows and collecting that data on species, the exact location. We have this nice handy-dandy little app that gives us exact locations. The map below here is all of our trees on campus, which is kind of crazy to me. We're able to map every single tree on that campus. I find that very impressive. And we are currently working on collecting data specifically on the facades, how much of the facade is window, what is the color of that facade, seeing if that is also affecting mortality. Our long-term goal is to create this database and this infrastructure to continue doing this, because 1 year of data isn't doing us a whole lot of good right now. We're not seeing a lot of strikes. So that either means that our campus is really good at avoiding window strikes, or we're having really bad non-detection error. So we're hoping to continue building on that and looking at that further.
What is that up there? Are those the dorms or the classroom buildings? What is it?
So on this far side, you see that yellowish line along the left edge. That's 9th Street for anyone who's been to Laramie. And then that's classroom building on that far side, and then that's Prexy's pasture, roughly in the middle. You can see the library and Union are more on this far right side.
And so what's the height? Is it 3 feet or 3 feet?
We're still working on getting the blueprints for the building so we can get more information on heights and like the area they take up. We're also looking at density of these buildings and see if that's impacting the rate of strikes. If they're flying slower to more dense building areas, maybe they're not striking hard enough to become cease. So it's all kind of a work in progress with this. So. But here we can see, so I'm doing 2 types of data collection. I'm doing behavioral data, where I am finding a spot near the facades that we saw here, all those purple lines. I have about 28 observation points, and I'm sitting there for 5 minutes and recording every bird I see. Everything from pigeons to, I see nighthawks sometimes, and each of those birds is recorded on this upper picture here with a line. Those lines are coordinated to species, and then I also have the height and date and time of that observation. I'm also collecting mortality data, like I mentioned again, on those purple line facades. And here we have a deceased European starling. So we're collecting data on where we found this bird, when we found this bird, all that information. We are very much encourage participation by Laramie locals and students. A lot of students, you walk around the campus and you're passing these facades on a daily basis. So we're trying to get more students involved. Just having this app up as they're walking, and it records our zeros, which are very important, because if we have our zeros, it means we made an effort to find a bird and there was no bird. So that's a very important part of our data. It's kind of hard for me to imagine zeros being important, but they really do have a lot of value in science. So if you're ever in Laramie on UW campus, it's kind of a little bit far away to be. So the reason I'm studying this is because annually we're looking at about 2 to 4 billion birds killed on buildings every year. That's a lot of birds. And if we can find ways to understand why, whether it's species-specific behavior, if it's density, if it's the environment around, how many trees there are, if there's fruit-bearing trees, there is more information to tell us how we can prevent these strikes. To see some reference, this is the 2nd highest cause of anthropogenic death in birds. The first is feral cats. Feral cats are not fantastic. So I'm really hoping to find some good information from this. There have been a lot of studies, but I think we're really honing in on the species-specific part of this, and I'm hoping to come up with some good answers. So this is a little bit more about Weinberg. You can follow us on any of these. If you have any of these social media or websites, learn a little bit more about Weinberg. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I guess if you guys have any other questions.
Are there certain birds that you're seeing a lot of that are dying on the campus? Like
Being
crows?
Being the first year, we haven't had a whole lot of data yet. I've seen a mix. I've seen some American collar doves. I've seen a couple of crows. I've seen house sparrows. So it's a mix. It's very, very mixed. So we're hoping in the next couple of years to collect a bit more data on this, and be able to get a better understanding of what's actually happening. Not just on our campus, but on campuses across
Oh, okay.
the United States. Maybe
Is there a particular direction, east, north, east or west or north, south, that seems to be more prevalent in the direction the bird's headed from?
we haven't analyzed that part of it yet, but that's definitely one of our points to look at is cloud cover, directionality of the building, where the bird is striking. There's a lot going into this, and once we collect this data, we can start analyzing more of these questions of what are we seeing, if there are any correlations here that are viable.
Are there things people are doing now that they believe affect bird strikes to windows?
One of the best things you can do is if you guys have ever seen those sticker sheets, there's a bunch of tiny dots. That is the best thing we've found. And a lot of buildings are not doing that. I personally think because they probably think it's not aesthetically pleasing. I think that would be wonderful if we get all the buildings to put all those sheets of dots. Would be wonderful. Yes.
Light pollution.
Yes.
These buildings that are lit up brightly at night, does that have anything to do with attracting or whatever birds to fly into those windows?
Studies have shown that turning out lights, especially in larger cities, is reducing the number of strikes. That's why you'll see some cities will do they'll do dark evenings where they'll just turn off the lights. They have had some conflict because people like to have the lights on so they can see where they're driving, where they're walking. But there have been efforts to reduce the amount of light pollution, especially in larger cities. These are mostly low-rise buildings that are on a campus that most of the buildings are shut down by 10 o'clock. So we're not necessarily I'm not sure if that's playing a real big part in it, but yeah, that's a big issue in larger cities for sure.
I got a quick question. Once you have some data, like in 3 or 4 years or something, are you gonna work with the university or the building maintenance people, or how can you affect change with your data?
So yeah, ideally we would speak to the university, not just our university, but other universities, and put forward some potential plans. Because a lot of campuses right now are looking for ways to be sustainable and green. I mean, we're looking at campuses that are becoming walking campuses, that are becoming green campuses. And if you become a campus that is bird friendly, I think that would be a really big plus for universities. That'd be another stamp on their resume. And if we could get them involved in a program like that, that would be absolutely incredible. Yes.
I'd just like to point out that the chapter has given our chapter president, as a matter of fact, a $500 grant to work on a garden outside the Fish and Game headquarters here in town. And part of that money is going into not only develop a garden, but take care of or put up a variety of bird deterrents on the windows alongside the garden, with the idea that he's going to be able to take five different types of deterrents and get an idea of which ones are going to work most effectively.
Yeah, because the goal is to prevent birds from running in the windows, not to prevent birds from being in the area.
Right.
So there have been studies where they try to put, if you've seen where people put stickers on their windows or like little window charms, those are not as effective as many people think. The best thing to do is put those large sticker sheets that still allow visibility through the window, but make it so that the birds can perceive it as a solid surface and not a continuation of sky.
Is there research on the actual birds in terms of how the birds are perceiving this? I mean, is somebody trying to look at their optical abilities and see if that varies by bird? Or, I mean, for instance, do bats run into windows? Or is there, because they're not visual flyers?
I think because bats are echolocating, I think there's probably a lot fewer strikes. With birds, I'm not sure if there's anything done on the optical side of that, but they have shown that like with the light pollution, going back to that issue, migratory birds are having a big issue, especially birds that communicate during migration, that they chirp at each other, they sing at each other, because one bird would be like, oh look, what's that over there? And all the other birds follow and all smack into the same window. And it's very unfortunate. That's why it's very important to, if you know that a city isn't doing like dark out during migration season, to maybe advocate for that, write letters and such.
When a bird hits a window, is that almost always lethal, or do the birds shake it off and fly away?
That's really hard to tell, because unless you have cameras on those windows, if the bird flies off, you're going to get a non-detection error. The only ones we find are the ones that don't make it. I have seen birds, like, in my own apartment complex, just like bounce off a window, going decently slow and pick themselves up and fly away. But it's when you get, that's why we're curious about the density of buildings, because if you have these high velocity flight paths right into windows, you probably have a lower survivability than if they're flying a little slower, maybe fluttering, looking at things, and they bump into it. So that's why density could be a potential factor in mortality.
You're trying to assess a lot of different variables in your research.
The nice thing is we have one data set, and our coding is fantastic. So I'm hoping to be able to play with as many variables as possible within reason.
Right, that's a challenging
It's the hard part of ecosystems. There's a lot happening at once. To assess just one angle, we lose a lot of the big picture. So trying to assess as much as humanly possible.
So, what distance are those microdots? When I was looking into this for putting like tape over the window and everything, they were talking about like a 2 inch, you have to have at least 2 inches.
I haven't looked too closely at that paper to see if they had like exact distances that they studied. I think they were just studying what was on the market, probably, what was available. I am not 100% certain on that. I'm sorry.
Because it seems like the birds most likely to hit the songbirds are, you know, they just see themselves going through this little thin space. And so it's not just, it's the reflection of your wonderful garden and trees in your yard that they think they can just keep flying right into it.
And there are some hypotheses that trees being close to buildings may be more detrimental to birds because they're, again, seeing that reflection, or they're seeking that food source if it's like a fruit-bearing tree or a nut-bearing tree, and they may also be running into that more frequently.
So if your cat sits inside the window, can they see that?
But yeah, a lot of the dots, if you guys have like vehicles that have like the top part of your windshield has those little dots, it's just like an entire sheet of that. And it's just an adhesive that goes to the outside of the window. And I think there's even ways where it's like one way. So you can put it on the outside of the window and it's visible from the outside but not from the inside. I could be mistaken on that though. Technology is fantastic. Yes?
Is there a rule in, not, this question may be for the audience too, is there a rule about how far you should have a bird feeder from a window area? Is there any recommendation?
I'm not sure on that. I'm not certain.
The closer to the window, the better, because when the birds flush, like, you know, a hawk comes in and they go whoosh, you don't want them to hit the window from far away, because by that time they're going pretty fast. So the closer your feeder is, the better, and the more you can see when you're looking up.
Okay, okay.
And the local birds, the ones that come to your feeder every day, are the least likely to run into your window. It's the travelers, the migrating birds that don't know the neighborhood that probably run into it. So that's been our experience. It's the, you know, watching the little yellow bird go, and knowing that your dog is out there collecting the samples.
Yeah, I had a nest of barn swallows up in my apartment, and they would sometimes they'd get frisky and like bump into the window. They were going very slow, so they usually just kind of figure themselves out.
Emily, what kind of fidelity are you seeing for your birds returning to nesting areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. It varies by species, but it's like between 30 and 40% of adults return every year, which is really high because that's like not just fidelity, but also survival. So we can find them. But males are more site faithful in my system, and most systems. So like females, they'll return to the area, but they won't be quite as close. But males, they'll come back to the same like I don't know, like 50-meter patch or whatever. So they're like really faithful. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's good for the geolocators.
So up in Pinedale, where there's been increasing drilling, have you seen, has that affected the population of birds?
Yeah, so that's
sagebrush and everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the things I'm looking at today to talk about is like site fidelity and how that changes across the gradient, because what my lab has found is that the density of birds nesting does not change across the development gradient. So like it seems like they are not recognizing that it's a problem, even though we know that if they're in areas of higher development, then there's going to be more nest predation. And so one of the things I'm hoping to look at is perhaps they're less site faithful to those areas, so maybe they're recognizing like across years, okay, we shouldn't be coming to these areas. But I haven't actually analyzed that part yet, so I'm not sure. But no, if you just look at abundance across the development gradient, it's the same. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the population's doing okay, because what might be happening is like higher quality birds might be moving away from those areas, but then the lower quality birds are filling in, so it doesn't really, it doesn't necessarily mean that like their population isn't struggling. We just can't see it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about the wind towers?
Oh yeah. So I don't study wind. I'm just with natural gas, so I'm not sure. But I mean, I do know that like windows and things like that. There's a lot of direct mortality with songbirds with wind towers, for sure.
Also affecting bats very strongly.
And bats,
You
yeah.
mentioned bats earlier with windows. A lot of your raptors and your songbirds and bats, because I mean, think about echolocation. If you're echolocating and then something suddenly is there, you don't recognize that. So
It might not seem obvious when you're driving by them, but the tips on those giant turbines are moving at about 200 miles an hour. So think of yourself as a little bird flying along, and how fast do they fly? And here comes this thing at 200 miles an hour. It's kind of hard to avoid.
so your fastest birds are traveling about 270 body lengths a second. That's your fastest. I think this is a minute or a second. I think it's a minute. There. It's faster than we can fly airplanes. Put it that way. By body length, not by actual speed. So we're talking about some really fast birds, and they're still getting smacked out of the sky. So.
Is there any research about solar because of the glass and the reflection and that?
It does increase the ambient temperature of the area that the solar farms are in, and I think that can damage habitat. I mean, fluctuations in temperature of even like 10 degrees could like wipe out certain species, and that's going to change your species composition. It might increase some or decrease others, so it's going to change things.
Yeah. And one interesting thing about solar is I don't think they've done research on. Maybe they have done research on birds. I'm not sure. Maybe you know, but I know there are certain insects that actually will come into solar farms because the reflection of the light looks like water. And so there are animals that see that and it becomes a trap for them basically. Like they go to these areas and it's not actually water. But for birds, I don't know if anyone else knows research for birds.
Since we're in a library, there's a new book out, or a reasonably new book out, I saw it in Barnes and Noble today, that has this title about, you know, how a group of amateurs figured out about migration patterns. Do you know anything about that book? Have you seen that book, or,
Yeah.
it was an attractive
Wait,
title.
what Barnes and Noble did you go to?
One was down in Centera.
Next week, our Barnes and Noble opens.
Oh, really? Oh.
Up there where National Grocers was. Yeah, they kind of swapped locations.
I'm really excited.
No, it's
Staff
the 25th. Anyway, if you can remember the name of the book. we'll put it-
Yeah, well, it's, I mean, the cover, I was wondering if you guys had.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, that sounds
Yeah.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a map, the same map you have, birds flying south out of North America.